2 weeks after my knee replacement surgery, I sent a text to the family group chat. Just a simple message. They're releasing me tomorrow morning. Can someone pick me up from St. Luke's? I watched the little check marks turn blue. One by one. They'd all read it. My son-in-law replied first. We've got the Hendersons coming over for dinner tomorrow. Maybe call a ride share. Then my daughter. Dad, it's literally a 15-minute drive. You'll be fine. Lyft is easy. I can walk you through the app. I sat in that hospital bed with the phone in my hand and the television muted, and I just stared at the ceiling for a while. 41 years I taught high school history in Columbus, Ohio. I coached JV baseball for 12 of those years. I drove my daughter Sylvia to every single cheerleading practice from 7th grade through her senior year, rain or snow or the time the alternator went out on my Buick, and I called my neighbor to borrow his truck because I wasn't going to let her miss regionals. And now I'd had a man cut my knee open, rearrange the hardware inside, and I needed 15 minutes of her time. I booked the Lyft. The driver was a young kid, maybe 23, with a protein bar wrapper on the passenger seat and a phone mount that kept tilting. He took one look at my walker and jumped out to help me in without me asking. Didn't say a word about it, just held the door and steadied my arm. His name on the app said Demarion. I thanked him twice. He said, "Family should have come for you, man." I said, "They're busy." He glanced at me in the mirror and didn't say anything else, but he drove slow over the speed bumps. My house sits on Clover Hill Drive in Dublin, Ohio, a 2-story colonial I bought with my wife, Patricia, in 1994. We painted every room ourselves. She picked the yellow for the kitchen, said it made the mornings feel warmer. She passed from pancreatic cancer 11 years ago, and I haven't changed that kitchen color since. Some things you just don't touch. When Demarion pulled into the driveway, I saw my daughter's SUV sitting there. She was home. She'd been home the whole time. I paid him and tipped him $20. He helped me to the front step. I rang the bell because my keys were in my coat pocket and fishing for them with a walker, and a reconstructed knee felt like too much. Sylvia opened the door in yoga pants and her oversized Ohio State sweatshirt, phone in one hand, glass of iced tea in the other. She looked at the Lyft car pulling away. "Oh, you got here already," she said. Come in, come in." Her husband, Derek, was on the couch with their 2 friends, the Henderson couple, watching college football. He raised a hand at me without looking up. "Hey, Frank. Glad you're back on your feet." Literally. He laughed at his own joke. Nobody offered to help me with my bag. I made it to the guest room under my own power, which I was almost proud of until I noticed the guest room was different. My recliner, the brown one I'd had for 15 years, the one that had a lever on the side that I could operate without bending too far. It was gone. In its place was a wicker chair that looked like it came from a catalogue photo shoot. Decorative. Useless. "Where's my chair?" I called from the hallway. Sylvia appeared in the doorway. "Oh, we moved it to the garage." Derek uses the guest room for his Zoom calls sometimes, and he said it looked too lived in. She made air quotes with her fingers. "We can bring it back if you really need it, Dad, but the wicker one is actually ergonomic." I looked at her. I looked at the wicker chair. I thought about Patricia, who would have had a conniption if anyone moved a piece of my furniture without asking me. I sat down on the wicker chair, and it creaked under me like a complaint. "I need my medication refrigerated," I said. "The anticoagulant. Kitchen fridge is kind of packed right now with the dinner stuff. Maybe the garage fridge." The garage. Where my recliner was. "Sure," I said. "That's fine. I want to be honest here, because I've had a lot of time to think about this. I should have said something that night. I should have looked at my daughter and said, 'Sylvia, this is my house. I paid this mortgage for 28 years. Your mother and I raised you in this house. I will not walk to the garage to get my blood thinner, but I was tired. My knee was throbbing. I smelled antiseptic on my own skin, and all I wanted was to sleep in a real bed. So I let it go. That was my first mistake. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched them settle in like furniture. Derek had started working from home more, which meant the dining room table was his office from 8 to 6. Sylvia had converted the basement into a wellness space, with a yoga mat, a sound machine, and a salt lamp. She'd moved a box of Patricia's things down there to make room. Just a cardboard box sitting on the concrete floor next to the water heater. Patricia's recipe binders, her ceramic tea set from her mother, a framed cross-stitch she'd made the year Sylvia was born. I carried that box upstairs myself, one step at a time, using one arm on the railing. Sylvia watched me do it from the kitchen doorway and said, "Dad, I was going to move that." "When?" I said. She went back to her phone. My physical therapist came Tuesdays and Thursdays, a woman named Gloria from a home health agency. She was no-nonsense and direct, and she brought a folding table and made me do exercises that made me feel 83 years old. One Thursday she arrived, and Derek told her to use the back porch because he had a client call in the living room. She set up on the porch in November, in Ohio, and neither Sylvia nor Derek thought anything of it. Gloria caught my eye while she was unpacking her bag. She didn't say a word, but she gave me a look that said, "Sir, I have seen this before, and it never ends well." That was the same week I started noticing things. Small things first, the whiskey I kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator. I don't drink much, but I kept a bottle of Maker's Mark for when my buddy Raymond came over on Sundays. The bottle had been full. Then it was half. Then it was gone, and there was a bottle of some cheap bourbon in its place that Derek had apparently decided was a fair substitute. Patricia's jewelry box was moved from the master bedroom dresser to the closet shelf. I only noticed because I went looking for the cufflinks she'd given me for our 20th anniversary. Silver, with a small garnet, my birthstone. When I found the box on the shelf, I went through it. The cufflinks were there, but the pearl earrings weren't. Patricia had bought those herself, saved up over 2 years from her substitute teaching income before she got her permanent position. Real Akoya pearls, 14-karat gold. She wore them to every important occasion. She wore them in the photo on my nightstand, the one from our daughter's wedding. I had told Sylvia, specifically I said, "Sylvia, when the time comes, those are for your daughter. That's what your mother would have wanted." They were gone. I went through the whole box twice. I checked the dresser, checked the bathroom, checked the nightstand drawer. I found a receipt folded under a small bottle of perfume on the closet shelf. A pawn shop on Morse Road, date from 6 weeks ago. Item listed as vintage pearl drop earrings, 14K. Value received, $380. $380. I sat on the edge of the bed and held that receipt for a long time. The room was quiet. I could hear Derek on a call downstairs, laughing at something. I could hear Sylvia telling their dog to get off the couch. Normal house sounds. I folded the receipt and put it in my shirt pocket, and I didn't say a word to either of them. That night I heard them through the heating vent in the guest room. The duct runs up from the kitchen, and the sound travels in a way that I don't think they ever accounted for. I wasn't trying to listen. I was lying in the dark, waiting for the pain medication to take the edge off my knee. And their voices just came up through the floor, like they were in the room with me. Sylvia said, "He can't manage the stairs long-term, Derek. The PT lady said so." Derek said, "So what are you thinking? Sunrise Commons has availability. It's not far, and they take his Social Security plus the pension. Does he have a choice?" Sylvia lowered her voice, but not enough. "We need to talk to the estate attorney. If we can get medical power of attorney while he's still in recovery, before he's fully cleared, it's cleaner. His knee surgery is in the documentation. We could argue impairment. And the house? Pause. It would sell fast in this market." I stopped breathing, not because I was shocked exactly. I'd felt it building for weeks. The moved furniture, the garage fridge, the PT on the back porch. But hearing it spoken out loud, in my wife's kitchen, in the house where I brought my daughter home from the hospital 34 years ago, was different. It sat on my chest like a stone. Derek said, "What about her college fund for Emma?" Sylvia said, "That's separate. That's her grandmother's money. The education trust Patricia set up before she died." And just like that, something in me went cold and quiet. The education trust. I hadn't thought about it in a long time. Patricia had set it up herself 12 years ago with a $40,000 lump sum and a specific structure. It was in Patricia's name as grantor, administered through our family attorney, Stan Kowalski, with a provision that granddaughter Emma would receive the funds at age 25 for educational purposes, and that if Emma did not use the funds, the corpus would revert to the estate of the original grantor's spouse, which meant me. The account had been untouched. With compound interest over 12 years, I did some rough math in the dark. It was probably somewhere between $80,000 and $90,000 now. They didn't know I knew about the compounding structure. Sylvia thought it was just the original $40,000, frozen in time. I lay in the dark and I thought about Patricia. I thought about what she would say. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't cry. She'd get very quiet, and then she'd get very organized. She'd have a yellow legal pad and a pen, and she'd say, "Frank, let's think this through." I reached under the bed for my laptop bag. Stan Kowalski had been our attorney for over 20 years. He'd done our wills, the refinance, Patricia's trust. He was semi-retired now, but he still took calls from clients he'd known a long time. I sent him an email at 11:30 at night. Subject line, "Need to talk. Soon." He called me at 7 the next morning. I took the call on the back porch in the cold, wrapped in my coat, knee aching, and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which was how Stan operated. When I finished, he said, "Frank, you understand what they're building toward. I understand exactly what they're building toward. You're still the title holder on the house, paid off in 2019, and you're cognitively sharp. You had a physical procedure. Nothing neurological? I taught AP US history until I was 62 years old, and I can still name every Secretary of State from Jefferson to present. I'm fine." Stan said, "Good. Then we have options." He paused. "But here's what I need you to understand, Frank. If you want this to hold up, if you want them to have no legal recourse when this is over, you have to be patient. You have to let them believe they're winning. Can you do that?" I thought about the pawn shop receipt in my shirt pocket. "I've been patient my whole life," I said. "A little more won't kill me." What Stan outlined over the next 2 calls was methodical. He would draft a new revocable living trust, the Halloran Family Trust, with me as sole grantor and trustee. We would transfer the house into the trust, which would protect it from any conservatorship action. Separately, he would contact the administrator of Patricia's education trust and flag the compounding provision, making sure the current balance was formally documented and tied to my estate. The key piece was this. Stan knew of a legitimate mechanism, something Sylvia and Derek had no idea existed, called a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. If I transferred assets into it and survived 5 years, those assets would be protected from any spend-down requirement. But more importantly for my immediate purposes, the creation of such a trust would require Sylvia and Derek to sign a document acknowledging they had no current or future claim to the property as beneficiaries of a separate instrument. Stan would tell them it was a tax strategy. He told them it was a tax strategy. He called them directly, acting as the family attorney managing my estate, which he was. He told them that given the property value, the education trust, and my pension income, we needed to establish a protection structure before I filed my taxes in April. He told them that for the structure to be valid, all resident family members would need to sign an acknowledgement form stating they had no independent property interest in the primary residence. He told them it was standard procedure. He told them it would protect the whole family's assets, including Emma's college fund. Sylvia called me after the attorney meeting, excited. "Dad, did you know there's a way to shield everything from estate taxes? Stan says it's super common. We just need to sign some paperwork." "Is that right?" I said. "It's actually really good for all of us." Derek looked it up and is totally legitimate. "Well," I said, "if Stan says it's fine." They signed everything on a Tuesday afternoon in Stan's office while I sat in the waiting room reading a 3-month-old copy of Sports Illustrated. When Stan came out, he set his hand on my shoulder and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The house was mine, formally and irrevocably. Their occupancy was now classified as permissive tenancy with no equity interest. The education trust was redocumented with the full compound balance, $87,400, tied directly to my estate. We had one piece left. I had been, for 3 weeks, playing a very specific role. slow, confused at times, forgetful. I asked Derek to repeat himself twice when he explained something simple. I left a pot of water on the stove once on purpose and let Sylvia make a fuss about it. I mentioned to her physical therapist friend, someone she'd brought over for dinner, that I'd been feeling a little foggy lately, maybe the medication. I mentioned it casually, in front of Derek, who I saw file it away behind his eyes. I was building their case for them, because the more confident they felt, the less careful they'd be. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Sylvia told me they'd scheduled a consultation with Sunrise Commons. She framed it as just looking, as making sure we know your options. She said Derek would drive me, as if my license hadn't been valid and active since 1973. I said, that sounds like a good idea. The morning of the consultation, I got up early. I dressed in my good blazer, the navy one Patricia had bought me at Nordstrom Rack the Christmas before she got sick. I wore the garnet cufflinks, and made coffee, and I sat at the kitchen table and I waited. Stan arrived at 7:45, ahead of Sylvia and Derek by about 20 minutes. He came in the front door with his briefcase and a young woman who worked at his firm, someone who handled real estate closings and had a notary seal. He also brought his laptop, which he connected remotely the night before to the flat screen in the living room. We'd done a dry run at 11 p.m. by video call. When Sylvia and Derek came downstairs, they found me sitting at the kitchen table with my attorney. Derek stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Stan, what's going on?" "Good morning," Stan said pleasantly. "I needed Frank to sign some final administrative documents before the trust structure is fully active. You've already done your part. This is just his portion." He opened the briefcase. Sylvia said, "We have the Sunrise Commons thing this morning." "This won't take long," I said. I let Stan handle the next few minutes. He walked them through documents that meant nothing new. They'd already signed what mattered, but I watched their faces. They still thought this was the tax strategy. They still thought they were 40 minutes from sitting across from an intake coordinator at an assisted living facility, building their case that Frank Halloran was a sweet but declining man who needed round-the-clock support. When Stan finished, he looked at me. I nodded. I said, "Before we go anywhere this morning, I want to show you both something." I picked up the remote and turned on the living room television. It was connected to a small device I'd ordered from Amazon, no larger than a thumb drive, that had recorded continuously for 3 weeks, from a position on the bookshelf between 2 volumes of a history encyclopedia. The image quality was fair. The audio was clear enough. I pressed play. The first clip was Derek, standing in the kitchen, talking on his phone, pacing. His voice came through the speaker with a slight echo. "Look, she's already talking to the attorney about payo, eh? Once the old man's out of the house we listed in spring, easy 450, maybe 475 in that market." Pause. "No, he doesn't know. He thinks it's a tax thing." Sylvia made a sound that was not quite a word. The second clip was her, sitting at the kitchen table after she thought I'd gone to bed. Laptop open, speaking to someone on video chat. "I talked to the Sunrise Commons people. If we can get in place before Christmas, we could have everything settled by February. Emma's fund stays separate. That's already protected. Everything else is just real estate. Just real estate." I stopped the recording. The room was very quiet. Derek had his hand on the back of the couch, gripping it. Sylvia was looking at the television screen, which had gone dark, as if the picture might come back and be different. "The house," I said, "was paid for with 31 years of my salary and 16 years of your mother's. The yellow in that kitchen is the color your mother chose because it made mornings feel warmer. And I've looked at that color every morning for 28 years because it's the thing I have left to her voice. You put her recipe binders next to the water heater. You pawned her pearl earrings for $380. I reached into my jacket pocket and put the pawn receipt on the coffee table. I found the receipt." Sylvia looked at it like it was something that could hurt her. "I know what Sunrise Commons is," I said. "I know what impairment documentation is. I know what permissive tenancy means, because Stan explained it to me the same week he explained it to you, and I have been the title holder of this property since before your husband had his driver's license." Derek started. "Frank, listen, I'm going to need you both to be out by the end of the month," I said. Stan has the formal notice. Stan slid a document across the coffee table. A 30-day notice to vacate, signed, dated, notarized. What happened next, I'll describe plainly, because I don't want to be dramatic about it. Sylvia cried. Not the way you cry when you're guilty, the way you cry when the door closes and you finally feel the draft. Derek tried 3 different arguments in quick succession. That they'd made improvements, that they'd been paying utilities, that this was a family matter that didn't need legal involvement. And Stan answered each one in the same calm voice a person uses when they've already won. I sat in Patricia's kitchen and I let them talk until they ran out of words. Emma was staying with her father's parents that week, which I was grateful for. She's 9 years old and she didn't need to see any of this. Before Sylvia left the room, she turned at the doorway. Her face was wet and her voice was tight. I thought we were helping you, Dad. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. I wanted to find something in her face that was the little girl who fell asleep against my shoulder at every baseball game from ages 4 through 8. I looked carefully. You thought about the house, I said. That's not the same thing. She didn't answer. She went upstairs. They were out in 26 days, not 30. Derek arranged a moving truck with the grim efficiency of a man who'd lost a negotiation and knew it. Sylvia called me twice from the new apartment they'd rented in Worthington. The first call I let go to voicemail. The second one I answered, and she said she was sorry, and I told her I heard her, which is different from accepting the apology. Some repairs take longer than others. Some don't happen at all. I don't know yet which kind this will be. I had the kitchen repainted about 3 weeks later. Not a different color. The same yellow, same brand, because I found a chip sample in Patricia's craft box in the closet, labeled in her handwriting, Morning Light, Benjamin Moore, 2009. The paint guy matched it perfectly. I stood in the kitchen the morning after it dried and poured a cup of coffee and just stood there in the light. Gloria, the physical therapist, stopped by the week I got my walker upgraded to a cane. She wasn't working that day. She just stopped by. She brought a casserole and she sat at the kitchen table for an hour and I told her most of it. Not all, but most. She laughed in the right places and shook her head in the right places. And when she left she said, Mr. Arbe, Halloran, you are something else. I said I was just a retired history teacher from Columbus. She said, that's not nothing. Raymond started coming back on Sundays once the house was my own again. I replaced the Maker's Mark. We watch whatever game is on, and we argue about the same things we've been arguing about since 1989. And it feels like something I didn't know I was missing until it came back. Patricia's pearl earrings are back in the jewelry box. I went to the pawn shop on Morse Road the same afternoon I found the receipt. The owner told me they were still in the case, hadn't moved. I paid full market price, no argument. $3,200. I took them home and cleaned them with the little polishing cloth from the box and put them back in the small velvet groove where they belong. Someday they'll go to Emma. When she's old enough to understand what they're worth, and I don't mean in dollars. Stan sent me a letter in December summarizing everything, the trust documents, the updated balance of the education fund, the notice of vacate, everything in order. At the bottom of the letter, below his signature, he'd written in pen, Patricia would be proud. I kept that page. It's in the top drawer of my desk. I'm 67 years old, and my knee works better now than it did before the surgery. I walk 2 miles every morning before the traffic gets heavy. I grade my old students' work in the evenings. I started tutoring, just part-time, a few kids from the high school near the house who need help with history and don't mind that their tutor moves a little slow going upstairs. One of them told me last week that the way I explained the causes of the Civil War is the first time it ever made sense to him. I don't tell them what happened in my house this past fall. That's not their story to carry. But I think about those mornings in the guest room with the creaking wicker chair and the medication in the garage and the voices coming up through the heating duct. And I think about what I would tell someone who's in that situation right now, lying in the dark, wondering if they imagined it, wondering if they're being too sensitive. You're not imagining it. Get a lawyer. Call an old friend. Do it quietly, do it carefully, and do not let anyone in this world convince you that the life you built with your own hands and your own years and your own love is something you owe to people who see it as inventory. Patricia used to say, "Be still and be smart." The truth doesn't need to be loud. She was right about that too. She was right about most things. I still have her recipe binders on the counter where they belong. The ceramic tea set is on the shelf in the dining room. The cross stitch is back on the wall at the bottom of the stairs, right where she hung it in 1991, a little crooked the way she always left it, because she said perfectly level pictures made a house feel like a hotel. It's a little crooked, and it's mine. And I'm home. I've thought a lot about the moment I chose not to say anything. The night I came home from St. Luke's and found Sylvia's car in my driveway, the same car that hadn't moved to come get me, and I walked inside on a reconstructed knee and said nothing. I've wondered whether that silence was weakness or patience, and I think the honest answer is that it started as weakness and became patience somewhere in the middle. That matters to me, because I'm not telling this story to make myself sound clever. I made mistakes. I stayed quiet too long. I let things slide that I should have named out loud the moment they happened. When they moved Patricia's things to sit next to the water heater, I should have said something. When the medication went in the garage fridge, I should have said something. I didn't, and that silence cost me 3 weeks of my own home feeling like a waiting room for someone else's plan. What I've learned, and I mean learned the hard way, not learned like a quote you put on a coffee mug, is that dignity is not something other people give you. It's something you decide to protect. And the decision has to be made before things get bad, not after you're already lying in a guest room listening to your own daughter describe you as a line item in a real estate strategy. Sylvia wasn't born cold. I know that. I raised her. I drove her to every practice. I stayed up with her through every hard thing she went through in her 20s. I handed her the keys to a house that her mother and I built with 30 years of ordinary effort. Somewhere between then and now, she stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a problem to manage. I don't fully understand how that happens. I think it happens slowly, in small compromises, in moments where someone chooses comfort over honesty, and over time those small choices calcify into something that looks like cruelty, even if it didn't start that way. Derek understood exactly what he was doing. I have less grace for him. What protected me wasn't luck. It was 2 things. I had kept my affairs in order, and I had a friend I'd maintained for 20 years who knew the law and knew me. Stan didn't save me. I saved myself by being the kind of person who had built that relationship over time and could call it when I needed it. That's the part people miss when they hear a story like this. They focus on the dramatic ending, the documents, the recording, the notice to vacate. What made any of that possible was the quiet, undramatic work of decades, paying off the house, setting up the will, trusting Stan with Patricia's trust structure. None of that felt like preparation at the time. It just felt like being responsible. There's something I want to say clearly because I think it gets lost. I don't feel victorious about how this ended. I feel sad. I miss my daughter in the way you miss something that changed shape on you, something that used to be one thing and is now another thing, and you're not sure it can change back. I don't know if Sylvia and I will find our way to something real again. I hope we do, but hope isn't the same as expectation, and I'm old enough now to know the difference. What I do feel is this. I am in my house. The yellow kitchen is the right yellow. Patricia's earrings are back where they belong. My friend Raymond sits across from me on Sunday afternoons, and we argue about baseball, and nothing is owed to anyone. That's enough. Some days, it's more than enough. It's the whole thing.